Hello, I'm very excited today to be speaking with Professor Johanna Joyce on behalf of yEFIS, the Early Career Network of the European Federation of Immunological Societies. Thank you so much, Johanna, for taking the time to speak with us.
No, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
So, Joanna, you did your undergraduate studies at Trinity College Dublin in Ireland, and then your PhD at the University of Cambridge in the UK. And then you spent many years in the United States, first on the West Coast at the University of California, San Francisco, and then at the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, where you first started your independent lab. So that's a pretty incredible journey for an early career researcher. So, what do you think is the most interesting thing that you learned during that time, or something that you would encourage or discourage a young scientist to do today?
Yeah, I think for me the most interesting thing was obviously all of those different countries, different cultures, and different experiences. So I really strongly encourage young researchers, if they have the opportunity and the flexibility to be able to move at least once in their scientific journey, to embrace that opportunity, because it really, even they're all, for example, English speaking countries, right? So that's one variable that's not on the table. And yet the cultures are very, very different. And also how science is approached is also somewhat different in each of those different countries and different institutes, different universities. So I love that. I love to kind of like change things up from time to time. And so it was really wonderful. And also, of course, the experience of meeting different people from different countries and cultures in each of those places as well. They were each very international, but in different ways. And so it's an experience that I'm very, very glad, very fortunate to have had, and I don't think I would have done it any differently than that.
That sounds fantastic. I think I absolutely agree with it as well. So then for the last 9 years, you've been a professor of oncology at the University of Lausanne in Switzerland and also the Center for Cancer Research, as well as then the executive director of the Agora Cancer Research Center. That sounds like many, many hats to wear. Could you tell us a little bit about your work in Lausanne and what your day-to-day looks like?
Yeah, so we work on the tumor microenvironment in my lab. So we're very interested, of course, in immune cells. I know that many of you are interested in immune cells too. So we work on different cancer types. Right now, we focus a lot of our research on brain cancers. We are very fortunate to have really amazing collaborations with the hospital here, which is called the CHUV Hospital in Lausanne. So I also have many MD, PhD physician scientists in the group. That's also very interesting to have people, from diverse backgrounds, but also different training backgrounds too. So, and I also teach a lot. So I teach bachelor students, master students, PhD students. A lot of that is in cancer immunology. I love teaching. I think it's a really very satisfying aspect of being a professor, because you can be spending days or weeks writing a grant and maybe you don't get it or your paper gets rejected. But when you teach students and you impart the knowledge that you have with them, that's immensely satisfying. So I'm very pleased to be a professor, to be able to incorporate teaching along with research and mentoring too. And I'm very happy with how it's worked out. And it's a privilege to be here and to be able to have such a diverse set of things that I get to do every day. I was saying to the people in the lab this morning, it can be intense and it can be very busy, but it's never boring. This job is never boring. And I think that's something that I appreciate. And of course, there's a lot of purpose that comes with this job as well.
That sounds amazing. It's really refreshing to hear that teaching, is part of something that you enjoy about this job, which is, I think, not super common actually among faculty. Well, okay, so today, in conjunction with the yEFIS Women's Day campaign, we're putting a spotlight on this commentary piece published in March last year, on which you were the lead author, Joanna. The centerpiece of this article was a scissor-shaped graph showing greater and greater attrition of women from academic science at more and more senior career stages. So was there a specific trigger that led you and your co-authors to write the commentary piece in Cell? Like, do you have personal experiences perhaps that made gender equality in STEM a cause that you champion?
Yes, so the answer to both of those questions is yes. The stimulus behind this is actually an interesting one. So I was very fortunate to receive actually a Women in Cancer Research Award. It was from the European Association for Cancer Research, the EACR, as well as the Pet Scholar Foundation. So I was giving this talk in front of thousands of cancer researchers in Turin in June 2023. And I decided to use part of that talk, the very end of the talk. Most of the talk, of course, was focused on our science. But I thought this is an opportunity where people are in this room, they have to listen to me. And I wanted to talk about the challenges that we have with regards to equality for women in science. And so I used the last 5 minutes or so to discuss some of the initiatives that have been implemented very successfully here at the University of Lausanne. People really actually appreciated this because often those types of talks are consigned to, early in the morning, meet the expert type of thing, 7 o'clock in the morning, and or maybe they're only attended by women, right? And so this was all genders, all levels of research experience, and fortunately it did register with people. The number of people that said to me afterwards, I'd never seen those curves before. I just can't believe it. And for me, I felt like everybody knows this, everybody's aware of this. So that was very eye-opening that many people were not aware of this huge disparity at the later stages of the academic path, let's say. And then there were many editors at this conference, actually, this cancer conference. It's the big conference that we organize every year at the EACR. And so several of them came up to me over the course of the next couple of days to say that they were really, really interested in this and would I be interested in writing a commentary on it? And I'd never thought about this at all. And then it went forward in the end with Cell, and that was in part because they were actually putting together a special issue on sex and gender. And so when I discussed it with my co-authors, my colleagues here, we thought that that was a really good kind of home for this, and we thought that it would be seen globally by many people, and indeed it has been, and it's received a lot of attention. So of course with our co-authors, so that includes any brilliant women clinicians and scientists here at UNIL and SHUV who are very, very involved in addressing equality, inclusion and diversity at all different levels, not just for gender, of course. And we felt that this would be really a great opportunity for us to share our experience and what's clearly worked for us here in Lausanne.
Perfect. So let me ask you, if people take away one core message from the commentary, what would you like it to be? Like specifically, to a young woman scientist who's maybe reading this now, what do you hope it says to them? And are there actions that you hope that they and their allies can take on a personal level?
Yeah, so I of course would hope that the message is hope, right? That it's a hopeful message, right? Because, really things are much, much better than they were even a decade ago. So I see really in my own kind of local community, but also globally, really a lot of positive changes. So that's what I would hope the take-home message would be hope, right? But I also would say to early career researchers, women and their allies, and we can talk a little bit about allies as well, is that along with optimism, there also needs to be realism, right? So I think we all know that these types of positive impacts, that's wonderful, it's something to celebrate. But we also can't take this for granted. And I think we're seeing right now with what's happening in certain countries in the world, where terms like DEI, so diversity, equity, and inclusion, are actually being used in a very negative way, totally taking the meaning, the importance of those words out of context, just how quickly those measures can be destroyed if society, if governments are supporting that, right? So I think that's something that's really critical for all of us to keep in mind. We can't assume that all of the problems have been fixed. We have to keep our eye on the ball, and we have to make sure that the progress that we've all made together, we don't slide back to the way that things used to be. So I have to say, a bit concerned. No, I'm very concerned about what's happening globally. And I'm concerned that this can also have an impact in a much wider way. So I think we really need to be very aware of that, and we need to ensure that these measures stay in place and that they're continuing to be supported.
Was there something specific you'd like to comment on about allies as well?
Yes, so this is something I stress every time I talk about these types of challenges and also solutions, right? It's very important that this is not seen, we're talking here about gender equality, right? I mean, gender equality is equality for all genders, right? It's not a special treatment for women, right? I think many people think of those being synonymous. We talk about gender equality. Oh, that means that women are getting a special treatment. No, that's not what it means. So I think that allies are critical, and here I'm talking about male allies, right? As an example, right, here at the university, many of the measures that have been put into place have come with the implicit and explicit support of the leadership. And right now, the rector, the head of our university, is a male, Professor Frederic Arman, and he's very supportive of these measures, as were the people that were before him. So I think engaging with everybody who's in our community, the importance of having a diverse community, makes everybody understand that this is not like, one group against the other. So I think we sometimes have to be careful with like women only type of initiatives that can sometimes be actually counterproductive. And men may really want to be involved and want to help, but they can feel excluded, right? So that goes against everything that we're trying to do when we talk about diversity and inclusion. We need to have everybody involved in making sure that science reflects society. Of course, there are also sometimes issues in the larger society too, but I think doing this together is a much more long-term strategy that we can hopefully keep these gains that we've experienced in place.
Absolutely. You've raised so many points that I'd like to, go into in a little bit more detail. So let's first talk about these measures that you've been talking about. So your article has outlined plenty of strategies put in place by the University of Lausanne and by Switzerland as national policy to help the retention of women in science, especially at more senior levels. So among these, is there one or maybe a few that you think has been particularly impactful or that you're particularly optimistic about in the future?
Yeah. So I give you an example from each of those at the university level first, and then at the broader Swiss level. So the table that we have in this commentary, actually, when we shared this on social media, I never forget this. It was one of the reposts was like, this table should be on the door of every dean's or department head's office, because these are the measures that every university or every institution that cares about equality or says that they care about equality need to be able to implement. So there are many measures in there. We're not going to go through all of them in detail, but really I encourage people to go check out that table because it summarizes everything in one place. In terms of like what I think are particularly impactful measures at the university, I think one really very beneficial measure is that when scientists are going on parental leave, and this is actually open to both women and men. So far, it's only been women that have applied for this. They can apply for a grant that will fund a research technician for up to 1 year. And this is an amazingly, I think, simple, but also very powerful way to ensure that that scientist can train a technician before they go on parental leave. Maternity leave, for example, here in Switzerland is 5 months typically. And then the technician is still in the lab when they come back after parental leave. And so that means over the course of that year, they're really able to ensure that their project or projects can still advance, so that when they come back, they're not taking like a negative hit from that in terms of their science. And that to me is the most impactful measure to really ensure that women stay in science. Of course, it's mostly right now targeted to students and postdocs, but in principle, those types of programs could also be in place for other levels of the academic trajectory. So I think that's one measure, and it's something that I'm very pleased to see more and more institutions, for example, across Europe, also have these measures in place, and some that are very effective basically have like a research technician for the institute, and that person is already trained in all of the techniques that are typically used in the labs of the institute. So then different scientists, become pregnant and they go on parental leave, and then that person needs very little training to kind of get up to speed to then be able to continue the experiments while they're on parental leave. So those types of programs, really, I think more and more institutions and universities are seeing how impactful they are, and hopefully that will continue. I think in the grand scheme of things, it's a relatively modest investment, and it has a huge positive impact. Then at the Swiss level, again, we're very fortunate in Switzerland. So our National Science Foundation, the Swiss National Science Foundation, has a number of different programs, and they kind of evaluate these programs every couple of years to see where they maybe need to implement new measures, and they're really amazingly data driven in all that they do, and that's also the approach that we have been trying to take here, to then see what works but also what doesn't work, right? There's no point to continue to invest funding in measures that don't work. So they do an amazing job, but the specific initiative I wanted to mention is called the HIT program. So this is basically for, I think it stands for something like high potential leaders. It's basically for associate and full professors, so women professors that have tenure, who envisage that in the future that they may want to advance into leadership positions. And so it's a year-long program for women. I think it's 25 people per year that can take part in this, and it's a pretty intensive program, but incredibly effective. So it's been running for about 5 years now, and so from the first year or two of that program, already half of the women that took part in it are now in leadership positions. So heads of departments, directors of institutes, leading programs at the national level. So that's one example of a program that's been very effective at the critical part of this scissor-shaped curve, which is at the very end, where there are many women either not getting promoted or choosing to leave academia, very few leadership opportunities. And I think it's important to shine a light on that, and also to show that these programs can be very effective also.
That's amazing. That's really detailed, and really also, shows exactly how the impact comes through for women, which is really exciting as well. Well, you already mentioned that Switzerland is in a position of relative privilege, especially economically. And at the same time, in the article itself, you also mentioned that it's socially quite conservative. And so that's quite an interesting mix of factors that can vary widely on a global scale. So sort of thinking a bit back to what we've already discussed about how the global trends seem to be going at the moment, for these kinds of initiatives to be widely adopted across Europe or globally, as we all want them to, do you think there are certain prerequisites that need to be in place in the broader society before we can see these desired results? In other words, how do you see these sort of academic specific initiatives interacting with society in general?
Yeah, so I think the major one that underlies trying to achieve gender equality, regardless of whether it's science or any profession, and this has to happen at the societal level, is ensuring that at the community level, or in this case, maybe at the university level, that there is adequate childcare for families. I'm not going to say for women because it's not for women, it's for families, right? And that's critical. And it's not just adequate childcare, that there needs to be affordable, high quality and flexible childcare. And this to me is the critical aspect, that for any university, any institution, any community, any city, any government that says that they really want to achieve gender equality, this is what they need to ensure is in place. And here, and I think really from talking with women around the world, this is something that is still lacking. We do not have enough childcare to make sure that for women, that their kids are safe and are being well taken care of, so that when they're at work they can try to focus on their work and not have that worry of, are their children being well taken care of. So that is something that is key. And I think that of course can play into gender stereotypes. Again, we can see surprisingly how quickly those types of societal perspectives and influences can change. Of course, here in Switzerland, it was a very conservative country. I think like many countries, it has pockets of conservatism and pockets of liberalism. Here in Lausanne, where we are, it's a really a very liberal city. So it very much depends, right? And it's kind of hard to generalize about that. It depends on each person's individual situation. But this is something that this cuts across all cultures, all types of professions, is the need to have women supported, families supported, so that people can, realize their professional goals and dreams, and that the next generation of children are well supported and well taken care of also.
That's a really sort of incisive single insight that applies really across the board. So that's, I guess, one more point that was in the earlier discussion was that you mentioned that especially the director of your institute has been very supportive. Can you maybe give some examples about, the forms of support that you've gotten from your institutes, or for example, from funding bodies? And conversely, have there been any challenges that you've encountered along the way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the support is coming from the university. So it's the president of the university, and it's the dean of our faculty of biology and medicine. So it's basically, that's where the support is coming from at the university level, not necessarily at the institutional level. How does that support come, right? So it comes both in terms of financial support, so for the different measures that we discuss in this commentary, and it comes in terms of the support that there are offices and staff dedicated to different types of diversity and inclusion efforts. There's also a new office dedicated to support people at all stages, right? But mostly targeted for helping students to go through situations if they're being harassed or bullied. So I feel very fortunate that the University of Lausanne supports all of these different efforts and really understands how important it is to invest some money in ensuring that our environment for teaching and for research is one that's inclusive and that's supportive. And I really have to give them immense kudos for doing that. It's very easy for people in leadership to say, oh, we don't have any funds for this, right? So that goes to the second part of your question, right? What are the challenges? So there's always a challenge in terms of getting funding for these types of initiatives. I would argue that these initiatives are so important. There's been so many studies that have shown that if you have more diverse teams, the impact at the corporate level, but also at the scientific level, is far more than with more homogeneous teams of people, right? And that's also been shown in many studies and meta-studies of scientific impact, for example. So the kind of like, for me, the economic argument is that one. But when times are tough, let's say, and cuts need to be made, sadly, these types of programs are often the first on the chopping block, right? So Or if you want to bring in new measures, right? Or you want to do it in a different context, then it can be challenging, right? So obviously I'm involved in lots of different initiatives, not just with what we're doing here at the university, but in many other different contexts. There it can be challenging to get the funding to support those types of programs, right? So that's something that still is a challenge, but of course we just have to keep trying, and we try as many places as possible, and we usually find a solution for this. No.
So let's say this. As a scientist, you are in an eminent position, and many early career women scientists would view your current position as a destination or an end goal. But where would you like to go from here? So, how do you envision or hope to see yourself and your professional environment as well changing sort of in the future?
Yeah, well, I'm also pretty happy with the end destination, because I love what we're doing in the lab. I love our research program. I guess I would love if there was more time for that and less administrative responsibilities, let's say. So what do I hope for the future? I hope to be able to, our lab, we can continue to do interesting research that we hope also has an impact. I am very excited to recently have joined the board of the European Association for Cancer Research, and I'm president-elect of the EACR. So I'm really that's basically a 6-year commitment to serve on the board, and as president-elect and then president and past president. So that will take up a couple of years in the future. And I'm very excited I mean, the EACR is a wonderful organization, like your group of societies as well, that's very much focused on young researchers. And so I'm really hopeful, optimistic, but also motivated to take these types of effective strategies to expand them on a broader level, like a pan-European level, or of course we can have big ambitions and think about at a global level as well. So that's something that I definitely want to continue to devote time and energy and enthusiasm to, and also yeah, I mean, again, I don't want it to be like, I'm only supporting young women. That's not the case at all. I mean, really, that a lot of what I do and what we do in these types of communities is to support all young researchers. I think, of course, there's quite some uncertainty at the moment, again, in different parts of the world. And I would really encourage young researchers to if they love science, to really explore this as a career, because I feel very, very privileged to do what I do. All aspects of what this job entails, as I said at the beginning, research, teaching, I love this too. Being able to have an impact, at a broader level is something that gives one a great sense of purpose. So for me, I'm happy to continue doing these types of things, trying to have an impact, trying to stand up for people that are not in the room where decisions are being made, or people that are for understandable reasons not comfortable to speak up. I think when you get to a certain point in your life, in your career, you don't care about what people think about these things as maybe you did when you were younger. So I think, again, those of us who are in more senior positions have that ability to advocate for others, to help others. And I think we also have a responsibility to do that. So I'm happy to continue doing that for as long as it's helpful to other people.